Have you heard you can listen to your favorite news podcasts ad-free? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app or visit amazon.com/news ad free. That's amazon.com/news ad free and catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Gonna start today with something really just bit me today. Saw a story. General Motors is going to buy $10 billion in their stocks back. $10 billion. That's a 1 and 10 zeros. I get writer's cramp just thinking about writing 10 zeros. But here's the thing, and this is what gets me. It wasn't too long ago that Mary Barra and GM and the big three crying poverty. We just don't have any money. We're broke. Sorry, we can't possibly afford to give decent wages. We can't possibly afford to bring back some retirement security. We can't make these the gold standard working class jobs of yesterday. Just can't do it. We don't have the money. We're not that company anymore. And yet, you see this news, $10 billion in stock buybacks. $10 billion. So workers had to go on strike for weeks to be able to put food on the table, but they're showering shareholders with cash? Because that's what this really is. This is what the good people at fortune.com are calling it. Showering shareholders with cash. GM also boosted its dividend by 33%. They're returning billions to investors, because they can. They've got all this money. And it got me, I'll tell you, just beyond furious, because this isn't how it always used to be. And I look at the Forbes definition for people who don't know what a stock buyback is. It's really just that. But Forbes has a really good definition. In one of their articles, they wrote a stock buyback is when a public company uses cash to buy shares of its own stock on the open market. Pretty simple. A company may do this to return money to shareholders that it doesn't need to fund operations or other investments. Like paying workers. Now understand, stock buybacks are not new. This isn't anybody who's watched this show knows I harp on this all the time because it's insane to me that we allow this to continue to happen. But it's not new. I mean, it dates back to the early 20th century and really took hold in the 60s. That's when it became more prevalent. That's when it became something that corporate America figured out. See, when rich people figure stuff out, they get a game, they figure out how to get richer because they're smart. And this is where the tax fetish people, we need to cut taxes because we need to get the money to smart people. And they are smart. They figure out how to make more money for themselves. Not for you, not for me, not for workers, not for communities. They don't care. They don't care about none of that. And the reason it stopped for the most part was they were manipulating the stock prices and enhancing earnings. Lining their pockets. Then came Ronald Reagan. 1982, the Securities and Exchange Commission, under the sainted Ronald Reagan, introduced Rule 10b-18. And what did 10b-18 do? Well, it was safe harbor. It was safe harbor for corporate America to go, we're going to buy our shares back. Open season without being accused of manipulation. This is the beautiful part of it. They got their guy elected. They got enough money into hands of all the politicians. They greased enough palms. And it wasn't that much. And how bad could it be? Right? How bad could it be? Well, we saw during the go-go 80s, stock buybacks boomed. thanks to leverage buyouts and well, shareholder activism. You know, the Koch brothers and their ilk getting more involved in politics, saying, hey, we want our money back. We want our power. We want our control back. This is another one of those levers for corporate America and the very wealthy to manipulate the entire system. And I know, but Rick, you know, it's good for everybody. No, it's not. And look, the 80s, it wasn't the end. In the 90s and the early 2000s, stock buybacks kept growing and growing because we then entered the era of maximizing shareholder wealth, maximizing shareholder value. That became the buzzword. That was all the rage. And they sold working people on the idea that, you know, you have stock too. You have retirement security. We've given you these 401ks that unfortunately very few people have enough in them to actually retire on. But hey, got you thinking about it. Got you thinking about the stock market, how important the stock market is, because you might, if we manipulate the stock high enough, you might be able to time it perfectly that you might get something. I wouldn't hold my breath, but you might. And then you go into the Trump years, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, even more incentives to buy back stocks because you reduce the corporate tax rate. And we've seen from that moment forward just massive numbers of stock buybacks. And you go, but companies, they have to act in their best interest. They have to keep shareholders happy. No. This is about greed. This isn't about good business principles. It's about greed. It's that simple. And the thing that's frustrating to me is I have people say, but hey, there are good parts to this, not for working people. The reality is, for working people, these are horrible. You stop and think about just the beginning of it. The fact that you're going to take $10 billion out of General Motors and you're going to hand it off to shareholders by increasing the share values, because that's what happened. The share values boosted because they bought a bunch of these back, and everyone's happy. They get the cash in right before Christmas. What better Christmas present? But for workers, you go, couldn't you have done anything better with that money? Something? Anything? Because I go back to that definition thing. That Forbes definition. A company may do this to return money to shareholders that it doesn't need to fund their operations. Money it doesn't need. I mean, let that sink in for a second. Now, remember, we were told that we have to give them all these tax cuts because, well, they need to invest in materials, and they need to invest in new plants, and they need to invest in research and development. They need to do all of this investing because they're taking the risks after all, right? That's what we're told. But they're not investing in research and development. They're not investing in making a better widget or mousetrap. They're not even investing in paying their workers better to retain them. Because after all, and this is the punchline, the $10 billion that GM is going to use to buy back these shares, that's one, wealth that workers created by making a product that consumers bought, and two, those workers who are consumers and all workers who are consumers paid a higher price so that GM could have an additional $10 billion to be able to buy back their stocks. And you go, but Rick, it's a corporate decision. It's important for them to be able to to do what they need to do. No, you see, this is one of those weird things. And I'm stuck on the Forbes definition. Money they don't need to fund their operation or other investments. Most businesses that I know, most business people I know and have known for the years, they plow their profits back into what they're doing. They plow their profits back into capital expenditures of better equipment and better facilities and retaining and training workers, because it's all about continuing the business. They don't go, hey, we got $10 billion. Party time. They don't do that. I mean, I think back to my uncle. My uncle built a small business back in the 60s, up until he passed here about a year ago. Everything was about making that business as strong and as big and as efficient and all of those things as possible. He led a good life, absolutely. But there were no massive stock buybacks. There were no, hey, let's throw big parties. No. It was about making that business as efficient and as workable as possible, giving his workers the best tools. And he used to tell me about this, that it was his mentality that everything gets plowed back into the business. Because that one was his legacy, but two is what was important in the industry, in the game. But we don't do that anymore. It's now this short-term thinking. And he used to tell me, look, we can't keep thinking quarter to quarter. And this is what this is. This is quarter to quarter thinking, because you stop and you think about it for a second. The massive amounts of money that are going into the hands of the few. Because remember, this isn't money that that goes to mom and pop. Now look, they try and sell us on this. They try and sell this all the time. Rick, the stock market is people. You know that, right? The stock market's people. And people invest in the stock market. And, grandma has her pension fund. Grandma's got her nickels and dimes. Her pin money is in the stock market. And you go, no, not really. When you stop and you think about the top 10% of wealthy people in this country own about 70% of all the stocks. The bottom 60% of us own about 7%. So, the working class, which is about 62% of the country, they're not heavily invested in the stock market. Now, again, some people like me have retirement portfolio that has, stocks that I have an IRA and a 401k and all those things. But I'm not an institutional investor. This is a rich man's game. I know it's not fair. It just is. And this isn't the 1960s where, again, you were building for the future. What's frustrating to me is we've been sold on this game that the stock market's that's how we're gonna make wealth. No, sadly for the mass of working people, that's not how we're building wealth. It's how the game's being rigged. It's how we're losing, because this is a massive redistribution of wealth. If you haven't figured this out, it's a massive theft. Because, also in the article, they talk about Mary Barra saying that, because of that UAW contract, because of those wages those workers are getting, the cost of a car is going to go up $575 per car because of the costs. Doesn't mention that $10 billion in stock buybacks to enrich the wealthy came off the backs of about 6 million cars a year that those workers make. Explain to me, instead of giving that $10 billion to the shareholders and enriching them, how about lowering the price of the car? Oh, no, we can't do that. Because then, one, we wouldn't have the talking point that those greedy workers wanted more and you're paying for it. Because ultimately, that's part of their thing. They're saying, the contract's going to cost us, $9 billion and, the strike cost us $1 billion. Well, the strike was on you. You could have solved that. You could have come to an agreement early. You could have made sure that there wasn't a strike, but you chose not to. In fact, you forced the hand. You got the strike you wanted. And only when it started to hurt did you go, well, we better solve this. So for me, the answer here, and what I'm hoping we take from this, is that we have to change this system. Now, understand, the Inflation Reduction Act, thanks to President Biden, there is a 1% tax on these buybacks. And you go, okay, that's something. I was saying we should be taxing at 20, 30%. If you don't have more productive uses for the money that your workers earn, well, maybe we need to find a better way. Because the sad reality is what's happening in this country is we're seeing workers' wages being crushed for the last 40 years. Only recently are you seeing a militant labor force going, hey, how about we get some of that? How about us? This is part of what's creating the massive inequality in this country. This is what is really putting us in dire straits. Now, what bothers me, and this is the business part. You're going to take $10 billion in cash, and you're going to then, we're going to buy some shares out there. Make sure our shareholders are happy. What happens if you have a problem? What happens if you have some kind of a downturn? What happens if you need some liquidity? Oh, I know, you can borrow from the government. Because again, these are companies that, when they got in trouble, who did they turn to? They turned to their workers first for massive concessions, and they turned to our government for handouts. Now understand, we did the right thing in saving those companies so that those workers would have jobs, those families would have health insurance. But it seems curious to me that we keep allowing them to hoard all of this wealth when times are good. But when times are bad, they know exactly where to come. They know exactly what to do. Cry poverty. Beg for socialism. When times are good, it's cutthroat capitalism. But when times are bad, they know where to go. They go to you and me. And we sacrifice time and time again. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got a lot to get to, a lot on this subject. I got to tell you, this is infuriating to me, and I got more on the other side. Because if you don't think this is going to... It's one thing to rob and steal. It's one thing to line the pockets. It's a whole nother thing to make us less safe. And to put our lives in peril. More after this. Thanks for tuning in to The Rick Smith Show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @RickSmithShow, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all that and much more at thericksmithshow.com. So how many people remember the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio? How many people remember how devastating that was/is to that community? Now, we don't hear much about East Palestine because, there are 1,000 other things now that they've distracted us with and diverted our attention to. But they're still struggling to get back to what was normal. They're still struggling to deal with the ramifications of that tragic event. Now, again, I still come back to we should be able to stop this kind of stuff. And one of the things we talked about back then, quite simply, was the fact that this precision scheduled railroading that the industry has come up with, to maximize their profits, to line their pockets, put more money in their pocket. This is what's led to a lot of just dangerous conditions. And it's what I believe led to what happened in East Palestine. The fact that you get seconds to do a pre-trip of a rail car is insane to me. The fact that you don't have enough people to do the job is literally insane to me. And now we see this story coming out of Omaha, the AP reporting. Evidently, Union Pacific is laying off more than 1,100 of their maintenance workers. According to the president of the Brotherhood of Maintenance and Way Employees, the union's been sending letters, to everybody they can, saying, hey, maybe, I don't know, do something. Maybe don't let them. Maybe have some oversight. Because what the president of this union is saying is there are some 1,200 planned projects in the next year that, just going to have to be delayed. I mean, we just don't have the people. Don't have the workers. We don't have the workers to do it. Now, they're not crying poverty. But understand, there are thousands of miles of tracks. There are projects across this country on these rails that need to be addressed, and we're just not doing it. And I know, profits, right? Sacrosanct. Got to worry about that more than anything. And the thing that bothers me is this is another one of these moments where you look at these railroad workers. They wanted to strike. They wanted to ensure that their contract gave them the ability to get better wages, hours, conditions, yes, but to have some say in the industry and how things are done. Understand, this industry, between 2015 and I guess last year, the big rail freight companies spent $165 billion on stock buybacks. Let me say that again. Now, I just went on a long rant about $10 billion from GM. But our big railroaders, our big railroad companies, our today's robber barons, $165 billion in stock buybacks. Now you go, $165 billion over what, an 8-year period? How much of that could have gone to, I don't know, upgrading your facilities, upgrading the tracks, the trains? How much could be done on maintenance? How much could have been spent on a workforce that ensures something like East Palestine doesn't happen? No, can't have that. Because again, we come back to this profit is sacrosanct. We have to ensure that the wealth class is well heeled, that they're well fed. And what's frustrating to me is we've kind of bought it. We've kind of bought this corporatist mentality. We've kind of bought this, whatever corporate America needs. And look, I get it. My entire life we were sold on the idea that, taxes and regulations are bad for business. I go back to, the job killing regulation talking point that Republicans used for years and years and years. I point to East Palestine. How many of those people are going to be sick for the next 20 years? How many of those people are going to die earlier than they should have otherwise? And we've forgotten about them already until whoever the next one is going to be. And now you see these potential 1,200 layoffs. This is a little story that just most people, it just goes by. The corporate-controlled mainstream media, they don't pay attention to this stuff much until there is a disaster. And then maybe they'll dig this up and go, well, they laid off 1,200 people back, or they laid off 1,000 people and we didn't get those 1,200 upgrades done. So, this caused problems. Now, remember, 90% of everything you see, hear, and read owned by 6 corporations. The wealth class, they know what they're doing. They're ensuring that their profits are protected. Now, Sherrod Brown, and this is, I come back to, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, the Sherrod Browns of the world, we desperately need more of. We need more people who are going to stand up and say, you know what, we need more. And I look at, Sherrod Brown back in 2021. He proposed the Stock Buyback Accountability Act of 2021, which would have imposed a massive 2% excise tax, double what we got in the Inflation Reduction Act. And I remember talking about this back then going, 2%, I'm sorry, that just doesn't seem right. Doesn't seem like enough. Because understand, these stock buybacks, what this is all about, it's another way to evade taxes. Because evidently just paying out dividends isn't enough. For most people, you're taxed higher on dividends than on this. And again, it's another one of those things where smart people, they've figured out how to game the system. The wealth class has figured out how to create loopholes you could drive a train through. And I'll bet you that train would be maintained. That money train, always well maintained. So for me, I keep coming back to the question, when do we stop allowing this? Because our votes matter. When I tell you that Republicans hate working people, just look at what they do. I mean that. All of this stuff, corporate Democrats and the entire Republican establishment has created an environment where the wealthy can never lose. It's working people who constantly take it on the chin. It's working people who constantly end up on the short end of the stick. And I know, but Rick, we have investments. And I do, as I said earlier, I've got investments too. But are you sitting there timing them? Because again, I come back to the 60s version of these stock buybacks. This is about manipulating the price. This is about artificially increasing the price of that company, which is not good for anyone long term. It's actually, I believe, quite dangerous. But hey, we're quarterly thinkers. So this quarter, we're going. Next quarter, who cares? Because ultimately, and this is the part that makes me go, where do we go from here? Ultimately, you end up with a scenario where the wealthy are well taken care of, and you and me, we're still fighting over crumbs. And I look at my friends who worked at Yellow Freight, a company that got themselves into huge, huge problems. Look to government to help bail them out. Haven't we done enough to ensure CEOs are well heeled? Because understand, these stock buybacks are just as much about promoting the compensation of CEOs and executives as it is in feeding the shareholders. Now remember, and as I mentioned this earlier, August 19th, 2019, the Business Roundtable told us things were going to be different. They were moving away from that maximizing shareholder value. They were moving away from that short-term thinking. They were going away from it. They were going to care about, if I remember right, consumers. They were going to care about communities. And most laughably, they were going to care about their workers. Now, of course, we ran through a pandemic. We had a massive economic downturn. We've had massive inflation. We've had all of this stuff since August 19th, 2019, where our Business Roundtable folks could have shown their values, could have shown that their statement meant something. It didn't. And what we've been living under is, well, they've been gouging our eyes out at the cash register. You're fighting tooth and nail to ensure that you don't get raises and you can't support your family. But man, they sure know how to line their pockets. And I got to tell you, it's angering and frustrating to me. And it's something that I hope we as working people come around to fighting back against. I know we can do it. Look, the reality is we can most certainly do this. We can most certainly say, enough is enough already. We're gonna pass some laws. We're gonna elect some people. But here's the reality. 2024, you get a President Donald Trump in office. That Inflation Reduction Act, done. That even meager 1%, that 1% tax on the stock buybacks, that goes away too. Because they're all about ensuring that the well-to-do are well-to-do. It is just that simple. And frightening and angering and all of that as well. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. If you miss any portion of the program, you can download the podcast. We do put that out for audio for all to hear, so you can never miss a moment. Also, make sure you check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. For those of you on the TV dial, thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time. For our radio affiliates, we're right back after this break. Stick around.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Our quote of the day from Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney said, and I completely agree with her. In my view, she says, fundamentally, there is a choice to be made. You can't be both for Donald Trump and for the Constitution. You have to choose. And she's saying, look, fundamentally, it's democracy or not. Take your choice. It's democracy or not. And look, we've been talking about this for a very long time. This 2024 election is a big freaking deal. There is a lot here that we stand to lose. Outside of all of the good things that I think Joe Biden has done, the move away from neoliberalism, the move to reshoring manufacturing, investing in infrastructure, the move to, give working people a shot. All that goes. But the other stuff, the big stuff, democracy the right to vote. And this is the weird thing, because I have some of my liberal friends who go, we made it through the last time. Institutions held. Barely held. No, I was listening to Hakeem Jeffries, and I loved the phrase that he came up with, because I thought it was really good. He said, Teddy Roosevelt had the Square Deal. You had FDR had the New Deal. You had Truman had the Fair Deal, and now you've got Biden. It's a big deal. And I agree. What has come out, and this is what's bothering me, what's come out of this administration thus far, just in that first year and a half, pretty big stuff. And what has to happen is we have to start amplifying the pretty big stuff that came out of it. And look, I understand everyone's ticked off about inflation. Me too. But that was going to come no matter who was president, because guess what? Everyone saw it coming. Now, did it take longer to subside a little bit? Yeah. Is it still lingering? Yeah. And I come back to why that is. Well, thank you, corporate America. Thank you so much for ensuring that, we don't hold people accountable. We don't go after gouging consolidated companies. And this is where elections have consequences. In the next 4 years, I would like to see who's going to be the next Teddy Roosevelt or Truman. Who's going to be the trust buster to go after some of these big companies? Look, it's outrageous, the behavior of corporate America. It's outrageous, the behavior of Wall Street and all of these hedge funds and all this stuff that's going on. The game is being rigged against average, everyday working people. And this is why, with technology really about ready to boom, who's standing up for the little guy? Who's that person who's going to make sure that the truck driver or the carpenter or the cashier or the hotel receptionist, who's going to make sure that they have jobs? I remember I think it was about 10 years ago, a friend of mine was saying he went to Japan, and there already technology had taken hold. He stayed in a hotel, and it was like a 70-room hotel that had 5 employees. That's it. And that's not just on a shift. That's it. 5 employees, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 5 employees. Everything else was done by machinery, mechanisms. The rooms were self-cleaning. The bathrooms were self-sanitizing. They had robo things vacuuming. Everything was done by machinery. The only thing that the actual people, you checked in virtually. The only time you ever interacted with a human being is when you had a problem, a real problem. And I remember, 10 years ago going, boy, do you think we would put up with that? I go, I wouldn't want to stay in a place like that. And he's like, well, you don't have a choice because everything's moving that way. And this is where we are. What choice do you have? You go to the supermarket. How many people use the self-checkout now? More than I thought would. And what's interesting is it's not just people like me who are saying, no, I'm not going to use this. It's the workers who have given up, I think. This is what's frightening to me. We've become so accustomed to this stuff that you're shamed for not using it. I've had people tell me, well, what's wrong? Don't you know how to use it? I go, no, I know how to use it. I just don't want to. I'm not being paid for this. I don't get a discount, do I? I'm not going to, as I'm checking out, if I make a mistake, I'm not going to put myself at risk for being arrested. It makes no sense to take on that kind of liability, that kind of risk for no reward. And yet we do it. Oh, we're going to save some time. No, we used to have more cashiers. That's how we used to save time. We used to have more workers. That's how we used to save time. And if they didn't have enough workers, we didn't come back. We went somewhere else. And the market used to answer. Problem is that's not where things are at. Corporate America has figured out, well, we can just make long lines and, well, they'll adjust. I had a cashier one time say to me, well, what are you, lazy? You don't want to do it yourself? I'm going, no, I'm not lazy. I want you to do this. I want you to do the job. It's really quite remarkable where we are. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1966. That was the day that the registered nurses of the Youngstown General Duty Nurses Association walked out of their jobs. Nursing could be a grueling profession, with long hours of physical labor for low pay. In Youngstown, the nurses were frustrated because there were inconsistencies in pay. Some recently hired nurses made more than those who had been working for years. Part-time nurses did not receive the same wage increases as full-time employees. They also did not feel that they had enough say in delivering quality care for their patients. When they asked to meet with the hospital's executive director to discuss their concerns, the nurses were rebuffed. They then contacted the Ohio Nurses Association union and asked for help. Youngstown was a steel town, a union town, and the nurses were ready to join in the local labor movement. At first, the Youngstown Hospital Association refused to bargain with the union. But when the nurses threatened to walk out, negotiations began. After 2 months of talking at the bargaining table, major issues remained unsettled, including pay and union recognition. Fed up, the nurses called for a mass resignation. 305 of the 433 nurses turned in their resignations. 2/3 of them were part-time nurses. They formed informational picket lines outside the hospitals. A federal mediator was brought in to settle the dispute. In the end, the nurses won significant gains. They received a more than 25% raise over 2 years. A grievance procedure was established for the first time, but most importantly, the union gained recognition and the right to bargain for better wages, hours, and conditions for the nurses and their patients. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So this is kind of a big freaking deal. And again, Joe Biden, he did this. And I'm going to, there should be a regular segment. Joe Biden, he did this. His National Labor Relations Board, a judge there ruled that Amazon actually violated labor law, broke federal labor law because, they just called organizers thugs. Just threatened people, just intimidated, harassed, just little stuff like that. Did a whole bunch of things that, that violate labor law. No, but here's the thing. In their defense, and I'm going to defend Amazon, they've been getting away with it for years. This is like, it's like, union busting 101. It's what they've always gotten away with. So, I mean, their defense should have been, well, we've always gotten away with it before. We've been able to hold captive audience meetings and interrogate people and harass and intimidate. We've always been able to do that. Why is now different? Why is now different? Well, because, Joe Biden appointed someone to the NLRB who actually cares about workers. Who would have thunk? Who would have thunk it? But on last Friday, the administrative law judge, Lauren Esposito of the NLRB, ruled that Amazon did in fact commit multiple violations of federal labor law at the warehouse in New York, called JFK 8, between May and October of 2021. Now, this is one of those things. Now, it's a big victory for the workers because, yeah, this is kind of a big deal. They've been trying to reach a contract ever since they won a historic election. Here's the problem. What's the penalty? And this is the thing that gets me. There are hundreds of cases. In fact, I think I read it was 240 open and settled unfair labor practices across 26 states. 240. And what's the penalty? What's the penalty for all this? I mean, you look at the Bessemer organizing campaign. All of the violations, all of the harassment, all the intimidation. And a lot of workers said, yeah, that's the reason they voted against the union. They feared losing their job. They feared retaliation, all this stuff. And yet, what recourse? I said from the beginning when Bessemer happened that the NLRB should step in and impose a union. And in fact, mandate bargaining begin immediately. Recognize the union and force Amazon to do so. We need to start doing this. The wishes of working people need to be heard and allowed. And you look at all of these cases. What's the penalty again? And as I've said a number of times on this show, it's almost malpractice to not break the law. If you're a company, if you're a union busting firm, it's malpractice not to advise the Amazons or Walmarts or any of them to not break the law. And you go, well, why would a lawyer, why would they advise them to break the law? Because the penalties are pathetic. I know it's the dreaded notice. We promise not to do it again until we do it again. And here is this moment where this is another one of those things where I say, without Joe Biden in the White House, we don't have Jennifer Abruzzo at the National Labor Relations Board. We end up getting some corporate shill, some union buster, who's going to go, yeah, that's fine. We're going to go back to the good old days. Captive audience meetings, harassment, intimidation, firings. Instead of what the National Labor Relations Act was supposed to do, which was to encourage workers to join and form unions. That's what the law was all about. It was all about encouraging collective bargaining. It wasn't a gift. It was, hey, this is your right. It's your right to come together. It's your right. In fact, we encourage this because that's how we solve problems. That's how we fix things locally. So for me, this election, 2024, it's more than just about Trump and Biden. It's more than just about, red hat, blue hat. It's about green in the wallet. Now, what's interesting is, and I think kind of cute, Ron DeSantis says he's going to win Iowa. Ron DeSantis still thinks he's campaigning for president. Evidently, he staked his entire campaign on Iowa. He evidently has secured a key endorsement from Governor Kim Reynolds and completed a 99 county campaign swing through the radical state, which I still think is Trump country. He says, we're going to win Iowa. I think it's going to help propel us to the nomination. Yeah, well, keep thinking because it isn't going to happen. Now, he did say that he's going to repeal and replace Obamacare. When are they going to stop? Now, he's going to say they got a better plan. They got a better plan, going to replace it with a better plan. Again, no details. No details. But he says he's going to have a plan that will supersede Obamacare. So it's going to happen. It's going to supersede it. He used a big word. And this is what's frustrating because, at some point, can we not just hold them accountable and say, look, dum-dums, we don't want you to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We don't want you to dump what little what little healthcare law we have. We want you to make it better. If you have a better plan, let's hear it. Let's see it. Let's see how we can make things better. If things are wrong with the Affordable Care Act, fix them. Doesn't that make sense? And I know it's about red hat, blue hat. My team has to win. And I get that. And I've said before, if Trump truly had a better plan, when he came out the first time and he said they're going to repeal Obamacare, going to replace it, he's got a great plan. And what he described was like car insurance. That's what he described. I said, okay, let's see the plan. Let's talk about the plan. Let's see it. There was no plan. Just like when he talked about Infrastructure Week. Every week was Infrastructure Week. If you remember, Infrastructure Week, as far as the eye can see, no infrastructure. Lots of cute videos, lots of cute images, lots of fun, entertainment. I'll never get out of my head him driving the little truck. But it didn't happen. We didn't get anything, and that's the frustrating part in all of this. When do we get the things we need? Now you've got the clown show in the RNC, and I guess there's another debate coming up that Chris Christie may or may not be involved in. I don't know if they're just mad at Chris Christie. Who knows? But can we really talk about issues? Can we talk about what's going to make lives better? Yeah, I've been saying this for a while. We need to be fighting for things. For the things that are going to make our lives better, and stop fighting over nonsense. I want to make sure that my kid's about ready to go off to college next year. He decided after all, he goes, Dad, I think I want to go to college. Plan A kind of fell through, age requirement, the whole thing. So he's like, I want to go to college. And we're now looking at colleges and the prices and the tuition costs. And I can't imagine how working families, how we do it. They have rigged this game so badly that the idea of working hard, playing by the rules, getting ahead seems like a fantasy from the past. And look, I know how we fix this. And in the coming weeks and months, it's what we're going to be focusing on. The goal in all of this is to change the world by changing our little piece of it. By getting people elected to office who are going to be champions of working people and not shills for corporate America. You wonder how we got into this mess? I mean, you stop and you think about how all the rules just seem to be rigged. Which is why the polling, we talked about the Wall Street Journal poll a couple of days ago. And how, working people are just kind of like, the whole game's stacked against us. There's a reason for that. We can vote for other people. We can vote for people like Joe Biden. And look, I'm a big fan of Joe Biden's. I'm a big fan, not just of him, but of the things that he's done. For me, that's the bottom line. Trump, what did Trump accomplish? Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's it. That's his major accomplishment. And what did that do? It made the rich richer. It made stock buybacks more profitable. Supercharged them. The divide between the haves and the have-not got bigger. And what were we sold? Sold some weird bill of goods about, I don't even know. It's the time we're in. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1966. That was the day that the registered nurses of the Youngstown General Duty Nurses Association walked out of their jobs. Nursing could be a grueling profession, with long hours of physical labor for low pay. In Youngstown, the nurses were frustrated because there were inconsistencies in pay. Some recently hired nurses made more than those who had been working for years. Part-time nurses did not receive the same wage increases as full-time employees. They also did not feel that they had enough say in delivering quality care for their patients. When they asked to meet with the hospital's executive director to discuss their concerns, the nurses were rebuffed. They then contacted the Ohio Nurses Association union and asked for help. Youngstown was a steel town, a union town, and the nurses were ready to join in the local labor movement. At first, the Youngstown Hospital Association refused to bargain with the union. But when the nurses threatened to walk out, negotiations began. After 2 months of talking at the bargaining table, major issues remained unsettled, including pay and union recognition. Fed up, the nurses called for a mass resignation. 305 of the 433 nurses turned in their resignations. 2/3 of them were part-time nurses. They formed informational picket lines outside the hospitals. A federal mediator was brought in to settle the dispute. In the end, the nurses won significant gains. They received a more than 25% raise over 2 years. A grievance procedure was established for the first time, but most importantly, the union gained recognition and the right to bargain for better wages, hours, and conditions for the nurses and their patients. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
In one of their satirical songs, they
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, George Santos, former Congressman George Santos, he has vowed revenge. There will be revenge, says the Santos. Which, you know, the weird thing is, there's going to be a movie, evidently. Evidently, there is a movie in the works of the meteoric rise of George Santos, his political rise, and well, I guess the fall. Evidently, they're going to go into the web of lies and fables and half-truths and BS. I guess that's I can't believe anyone's gonna put that. I can't believe anybody would watch it. That's the other part of this, because you know the train wreck that has been was not all that entertaining. And here's what's frustrating to me. You know, all the time that he was in Congress, all the time that he all the resources that we put into him having an office and him putting forth legislation and all that stuff, because I think he put forth 40 pieces of legislation. None got a committee vote or even looked at. But you could have had someone in there who truly could care about people. George Santos clearly cares about George Santos. That's what for me, that's what came out of this. And I look at a lot of the clown show. It really is just about them. It's not about you or me. It's not about us. It's not about making lives better. It's not, none of that. It's about how do we screw over working people a little bit more? How do we make things just a little bit worse for people? So am I sad to see George Santos go? No. Would I have voted to oust him? No. I do believe that Democrats should have left that albatross around the Republicans' neck. If they wanted him out, that's their thing. And I also believe in innocent until proven guilty. While he was an absolute train wreck, wasn't proven guilty. And I've gotten a lot of email on that because I said it the other day and someone was like, "Oh, I can't believe you'd say that. Can't believe that you'd side with." No, I'm siding with the rule of law. I believe in it. Even, you know, same thing with Menendez. Now, do you take away all classified information? Yeah. Do you have like a probation? Yeah. You say, look, you know, you got some problems. You can work that out, but you're not getting any more classified documents. You're not getting access to top secret information. Sorry. Not yet. Those are just sane, rational precautions. That's just, I don't know. taking sane steps to not expose yourself. Now, I'm curious what the revenge will look like. I'm curious what kind of, he's going to put giant dolls out in front of people's house or blow. You saw the big balloon he put out in front of the Capitol. Can we just legislate? Can we just get something done, please? I'm begging you. It's just, we can do better. I believe we can do better, and we will do better. We have to do better. It's that simple. Anyway, if you miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you will find ours. I want to hear what you think, what you have to say. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Angry, evil ones, right to the top of the list. We are in our new format of the radio program, and I want to thank all of our radio affiliates who have picked up this hour of the Rick Smith Show. We will be back tomorrow. But here's the thing. This is the great thing. We're going to be focusing a lot more on issues and topics and a lot less from the horse race. I think we can do a much better job of changing the world by educating, informing, and activating. Thanks for being here. See you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.